Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Hey, Firefly. Hey, Mooney. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. We are on the book Sweet September, and we are on chapter 3. Please remember to hit that thumbs up. Share me out if you have the capability. You know, all the things. We got 5 thumbs up, 6 thumbs up. Awesome. Hey, Christina. Good to see you. Hey, Brian.
Hey, y'all.
Look, it says I got 6 thumbs up and I've got 2 watching. Isn't that crazy?
You know your camera's not open all the way.
Yeah, I see. There's that better. You happy? Now they can see your whole body instead of a blur.
I know.
Alright, let's get started.
What you reading?
Sweet September.
So what was the first episode about?
You should have watched it. You can go back to the replay and listen to it.
You're not going to recap it?
Nope.
George and married.
Nope. We ain't
Was
doing it.
hiking through the woods. Came across a bear.
Alright, chapter 3. Charlotte didn't
Excuse me.
Charlotte didn't realize she was holding her breath as her ears perked to the sound of Emily's footsteps coming down the stairs. She let out the smallest sigh of relief as Emily emerged wearing a serious expression and also wearing one pair of jeans that actually fit her and weren't skin tight. Hey, Halloween collector, thanks for coming in. Without a word, Emily lifted the pink smoothie from the counter and took a long drink. The smallest pink mustache graced her top lip, but she quickly licked it away with the tip of her tongue. You look nice today. I like your hair like that.
Thanks.
Just like your mother used to wear. Charlotte wanted to add, but didn't, for both their sakes. Still, an ache filled her chest as she looked into her granddaughter's eyes, again praying a silent prayer that as a grandma, she would do better on the child rearing this time around. Ashley can stay the night, and I was wondering if we could stay up and watch a movie. Maybe that funny one Uncle Pete let us borrow. Ashley hasn't seen it yet. Charlotte frowned, thinking about Pete's taste in movies. She's definitely have to check to see if it was on the approval list. Mooney says hi, Barrett.
Hi, Mooney.
Sam stood and grabbed a soccer ball off the floor, tossing it back and forth in his hands, with his long arms stretched from side to side to catch it. Months ago, a ball being tossed around her dinner table and all her antiques displayed in the hutch would have made Charlotte anxious. Now she was hardly fazed. She was just glad he wasn't kicking it. I wouldn't get your hopes up about a movie, Sam butted in. I've already gotten the lecture that we should accept a lot of chores tomorrow. Then he mouthed the word harvest. Thank you, Brian. Oh, the membership went to Christina. Awesome. He's kidding, right? Emily cocked one eyebrow. I'm still sore from all the stuff you made us do last weekend. She rubbed her thin arm for emphasis. Charlotte heard the back door open and watched a blur of boy zip by as Christopher hurried around the counter, up the stairs, and into the bathroom. You're looking at this all wrong. Charlotte brushed a lock of hair behind her ear, making a mental note to schedule a haircut. Harvest is my favorite time of year. It's a time to celebrate the good bounty the Lord has provided and the fact that He's taken care of us for another year. Besides, it's the harvest that pays for that smoothie in your hand and the polish on those nails. There's nothing wrong with a little hard work. She could tell by the look on Sam and Emily's faces they weren't buying her pep talk. She heard the water shut off in the bathroom sink and spotted Christopher emerging, shaking droplets of water from his hands. The rumble of the school bus approaching caused them all to turn to the window, and there was a second rumbling just under Charlotte's rib cage that told her Christopher was up to something. I like the harvest, Grandma, Christopher blurted out. He ran out the back door before she had a chance to remind him to dry his hands or to ask what he was up to. Sam dropped the soccer ball, letting it bounce and roll to a stop in the corner, and grabbed his backpack, swinging it over his shoulder. Come on, Betty Sue. We must hurry and catch the wagon to the one-room schoolhouse, or we'll have to walk to school both ways uphill. Coming. I only hope you remember an apple for the teacher. I think she's really swell. Both older kids nodded a goodbye before they headed out the door. Charlotte watched as they hurried to the school bus. It was only a few weeks into the school year, but the kids had adjusted to their new schedules. Christopher liked his new teacher, Miss Wright, and Emily had moved up to the high school this year, which seemed to suit her just fine. Charlotte watched as they climbed onto the bus and chose their seats. Sam sat close to the front because he couldn't be bothered to walk all the way to the back with the other teenagers. Emily sat in the middle next to a classmate Charlotte recognized, but whose name she couldn't recall. Even from this distance, Charlotte could make out how the two girls turned toward each other, both of their mouths moving at once. And Christopher sat close enough to the back to get a sense that he was sitting with the big kids, but far enough away not to cause any trouble with them. Charlotte waved as the bus drove away, though no one probably noticed. Then she turned to scan the now empty kitchen. Who was she fooling? It wasn't empty at all. Breakfast dishes were still stacked on the table. Clumps of mud rested on the floor where Pete had sat, despite the fact he'd stomped his boots at the back door. A trail of more mud followed the path to the bathroom where Christopher had scampered before heading off to school. Charlotte made a mental note to check the bathroom vanity for one of Christopher's treasures. No doubt she'd find a special rock or bird feather. But first, Charlotte poured herself a cup of coffee and grabbed her Bible from its place on the hutch. Then she settled down in her favorite dining room chair, which provided a view out the window of her men hard at work. The two working side by side, yet not really together. Their own stubborn pride kept them from connecting as she'd always hoped they would. But enough of those worries. Charlotte opened her Bible to where she had been reading in Ruth. It's a story she'd found herself returning to, a story of family bonds that tendered her heart, a story she always seemed to be drawn to at harvest. The thought of the young woman, dear Ruth, gleaning the fields was one she could relate to. Charlotte could almost picture the sweat on Ruth's brow as she followed the harvests, gathering armfuls of provisions for her and her mother-in-law, just doing what she had to after they lost so much. It was in her cheerful heart and in being obedient to Naomi's request that Ruth found favor in both Boaz and God's eyes. Thank you for all the hearts. Hey Vermont, thank you for coming in. Hi Tom. Good to see you. Although Charlotte didn't know if it was the right interpretation, lately she'd like to imagine God looking upon her as Boaz looked at Ruth, gazing down with favor. Charlotte glided her finger down the page and came to the passage in chapter 2, verse 11, the one she liked best. She felt the sun on her shoulders and smiled as she read the words to herself, imagining Boaz speaking them to Ruth. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have to come to take refuge, reward you fully. Charlotte closed the Bible and placed it on the sacred table on which hundreds of meals had been served over the years. and in her soul she ate those words as hungrily as the men of the house had gobbled up their breakfast. The message fed her, strengthened her, and though the situation wasn't the same, she could relate. All right, Tom. She had been the one welcoming in the children, but she understood what it was like to feel like a stranger in a strange land. If parenting 3 young children in this decade at her age wasn't strange, she didn't know what was. Charlotte also liked the idea of nestling under the Lord's wings. She'd gathered enough eggs in her day to fully appreciate the softness, warmth, and security found under them. Finally, she clung to the idea that God was her refuge. Sure, she was surrounded by a flurry of activity, but it was the moments like these where she found a safe haven, a shelter of rest. It was also in these quiet moments she gained the strength to create a haven of security for her grandchildren. Charlotte closed her eyes and prayed a silent prayer for those she loved. Lord, reward us fully this day, not with things of the world, for that we have no need, but with more of you, Lord, more of you. Chapter 4. Charlotte tried not to chuckle at the glassy-eyed looks the 4 children offered her the next morning. Though there was no school this Friday, Bob insisted they get up early. Kids gotta know what real work is like. He'd insisted the previous night, and just because Ashley was a guest didn't give her a hall pass. Sorry, you have to do chores on our day off, Emily said to Ashley, taking a bite of her bran muffin placed before her. Ashley shrugged, her red curls poking out from under a baseball cap that read Cougars. No different at my house. There's always chores. Even though we do live in town, maybe together we can get them done sooner. The younger girl wiped crumbs from her lip with her finger and then glanced up at Charlotte. Are we going to take out the pipes? Pipes? It was the first word Sam spoke all morning. Charlotte set her coffee mug on the oak table and nodded. Irrigation pipes, you know, the ones we laid out, the ones whose gates you've been changing for water flow to the fields. They have to be removed before Uncle Pete gets the combine out. Yeah, I know, but there are a lot of them. That'll be a lot of work. From across the table, Bob glanced up from his open Bible and scolded. She didn't know if it was because they were talking too much during his traditional quiet time, or she mentioned it would be Pete who would be running the combine this year. It shouldn't take too long, Charlotte added, tapping Christopher's shoulder and pointing to his plate. Instead of looking at her, he stared at the bran muffin as if she'd just placed a clump of manure on his plate. Uncle Pete got most of the pipe up while you were at school, but her words were interrupted as Christopher sucked in a dramatic breath, pinched his nose, and took a bite of the muffin. He closed his eyes and chewed with extra emphasis, no doubt knowing all eyes were on him. After a few more chews, his eyes popped open. Not bad. He unpinched his nose and took another bite. Then he dropped a crumb to the floor. Lightning quickly licked it up. See, Christopher added, even Lightning likes it. Charlotte chuckled. I'm glad you and Lightning approve. She turned back to the girls. As I was saying, if we work hard today and tomorrow morning, maybe we can all go to town Saturday afternoon. Emily cocked an eyebrow, and Charlotte imagined her thoughts as if there is anything to do in town. Ashley jumped to her feet. Great, come on. She tugged at Emily's arm. Christopher finished his muffin, scrambled eggs and turkey sausage, and then dropped to the floor and quickly put on his shoes. He patted Lightning once and then jumped to his feet. I'm going outside, he spouted, and Charlotte didn't miss the mischievous twinkle in his eye that could only mean one thing. Christopher had most likely found another treasure he was keeping under wraps. Since she hadn't seen anything in the bathroom yesterday, she knew it had to be something big, something worth hiding. So, if I do this, will I be eligible for 4-H? Sam smirked. Bob opened his mouth, and Charlotte reached for the coffee pot before he had a chance to speak. Need a refill, hun? She poured him a second cup without waiting for an answer. He glanced at her and closed his mouth again. She could see his mind replaying the scene and coming up with a better response. You kidding? 4-H? Why, that's just the start, Bob finally said. There's nothing like starting up a combine and driving it through the fields, knowing that because of your hard work, your family will be warm and well fed all winter. I'd rather be driving a convertible to the beach. Sam rose and slipped on one of Pete's old work jackets. At least that would make having my learner's permit worthwhile. At least he's doing what he's told, Charlotte thought. Well, work on obedience first and attitude later. You kidding? Bob said for a second time in 1 minute. I'm not going to drive a car that isn't even decent enough to keep out the rain. Yeah, well, that's because in San Diego we don't have... Grandma, Christopher rushed in the door, interrupting his brother. Come quick. Charlotte jumped to her feet. Something wrong? Someone get hurt? Yeah, the garden. It's all torn up. Let's see. Charlotte's first thought as she looked out at the garden was that during the night the farm animals decided to have a square dance in the middle of her peas and carrots. She walked forward, her feet sinking into the soft dirt to get a closer look. Look, Grandma. Christopher raced forward, pointing to the rows. That's where the carrots were for my cake. Remember, I was going to pick them and you said to wait until Sunday, then we could bake it together? And the yellow squash. He raced over and pointed to the far row. The 3 small ones are gone. Stop, Christopher. Get back here. Look what you're doing. Sam ambled over. Even the news that the garden was uprooted hadn't caused him to move any faster than necessary. You've gone and done it now. You've ruined all the evidence. Evidence for what? Emily and Ashley approached, each one carrying a barn cat that had no desire to be held. The cats twisted and turned, attempting to break free, but to no avail. Evidence of the thief. It has to be a 2-legged kind. I can't imagine a rabbit or a deer carrying off squash. He pointed to the row. But look, you've trampled over everything. There's no way we can look for footprints now. While the kids argued, Charlotte crossed her arms over her chest, a sinking feeling coming over her. Whether it was animals or even a person, she'd planned on that produce. 3 extra mouths to feed hadn't been good on the budget. The warm Indian summer had helped the garden flourish even later than usual, and now this. Why don't we let Uncle Pete look at it and come to a conclusion? He'll know. She heard the sound of someone clearing his throat and noticed Bob standing there. His eyes weren't on the garden, but on her. He had an angry look as if she'd just slapped him in the face. It's animals, that's for sure. People around here don't do that to each other. It's not California. But what's done is done. Ain't nothing we can do about it now. So I'd suggest everybody stop their gawking and get to work. Charlotte nodded, but inside she was unsure what she'd said to get Bob in such a huff. It wasn't like she was doing anything wrong. In fact, she went out of her way to try to foster peace between all members of their new family unit. What felt like a rock settled in the pit of her stomach, and a new wave of wariness washing over her. Do as your grandpa says, kids. Load up in the truck, and he'll show you what to do. She forced a smile and patted Christopher's shoulder. We'll talk more about this mystery at lunch. Charlotte watched as the kids hurried over to the truck. She tucked her hands in her pockets as the girls climbed in the cab. Sam jumped onto the flatbed and reached down to help Christopher up. She opened her mouth to call a reminder to Sam to make sure Christopher didn't get too wild, especially around the farm equipment, but changed her mind. Sam did watch out for Christopher. He didn't need her nagging and reminding him all the time. She waved as she watched the truck rumble out to the far soybean field, remembering how Dennis always complained that Charlotte was on her all the time and didn't give her room to breathe. Those words had haunted her when her daughter first ran away at age 18, and they've been resurrected, replaying every time she thought about reminding them, or as Dennis would say, nagging them. She turned and crossed her arms over her chest, taking in the sight of her garden. Whoever, whatever, sure had a field day, she sighed, leaning over to pluck up a carrot top devoid of carrot. One more thing to think about, something else to clean up. Quick footsteps led her to the tool shed to retrieve a hoe. No time like the present to complete a distasteful task, Charlotte mumbled to herself, repeating one of her mother's favorite phrases. She lifted the hoe, the wood of the handle scratching her palm, and her ears perked to the sound of a car coming up the driveway. She tilted her head to listen closer. It was definitely a car. It didn't have the deep rumble of Bob's truck or the sputtering sound from Pete's rig that he'd named Lazarus, due to the fact that it had been resurrected more times than they could count. She returned to the hoe, wiped her hand on her jeans, and hurried towards the car. It was a small red compact car, one she didn't recognize from around town. The Indian summer sun gleamed on the window, and through the glare, she barely made out someone inside waving. Charlotte shielded her eyes and walked from the doorway of the barn towards the driveway. Before she reached it, the car parked and a young woman slid out of the front seat. She was tall with straight dark hair that brushed her shoulders. She smiled and waved, then glanced around as if expecting to see someone else. "Hello, Miss Stevenson? Do you remember me?" Charlotte cocked her head, taking in her round face, the bangs fringed on her forehead, and the slightest crinkles at the corners of her eyes when she smiled. The woman laughed. "Okay, maybe this will help." She took her bangs and lifted them straight. "Just imagine me with big hair and bright makeup." "Dana?" Charlotte rushed forward. "Why, I haven't seen you since the early 90s when I headed to college. I know, it's been so long, which just blows my mind because, well," she glanced around, "you know," she shrugged, "I spent so much time here." Charlotte closed the gap and grasped her hands, and I loved every minute of it, especially after Den. The word wouldn't come. Charlotte felt as if an apple core was stuck in her throat. She covered her mouth with her hand. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be easier by now." Dana squeezed her hands. "I understand, and I'm sorry. I didn't contact you sooner. I just moved back into town, but once I found out..." "Hold on." She realized Charlotte's hands and released Charlotte's hands and moved to her car, pulling a small vase filled with roses from the passenger seat. She approached and offered her gift. "I bought these. They are the last blooms from Grandma's garden. She insisted I bring them over. She doesn't get out much and can't hear well on the phone. Otherwise, she would have called you sooner to offer her sympathy." "Hey, Steve." "Hey, Jen." Charlotte took in the sight of the young woman, remembering how many hopes she'd wrapped around her. Dana had dated Pete for most of their high school years. Every prom photo and snapshot of Pete in high school had Dana in it. They were best friends, as well as being romantically involved. She took the vase from the young woman, noticing no ring on her finger. Charlotte smiled and breathed in the scent. Well, you thank her for me, will you? And please come inside. It's a mess with the kids and all, but I made some muffins this morning. They might be half decent because the kids ate most of them. They must be half decent because the kids ate most of them. Dana glanced at her watch. I have about 30 minutes before I head back to school. The kids get the day off, but not me. Charlotte took a few steps before realizing Dana didn't follow. She glanced back over her shoulder, and well, there's another reason for my visit, too. It's not pleasant. Dana tapped her lower lip with her pointer finger. Is something wrong? Suddenly, the heavy scent of roses overwhelmed her. I'm back this year as a teacher. I'm Miss Simmons, Sam's third period English teacher. She pulled a piece of paper out of her back pocket and stretched it out to Charlotte. It's Sam's essay. He turned it in this way, all folded up. Charlotte balanced the vase against her hip and took the paper from Dana's hand. I had heard Sam mention a Miss Simmons, but I never made the connection. I suppose I need to read it? Dana nodded. Yeah, she offered a small smile. But I'm game for a muffin if you're still offering. I'll pour the coffee if you have any left from breakfast. Dana led the way and Charlotte followed, slowly unfolding the paper, shaking it out with one hand. The paper only held 7 words. Life stinks. Nebraska stinks. End of essay. That's funny. Charlotte sipped her warmed up coffee and watched as the sweet high schooler from her memory transformed into a serious teacher before her eyes. You know, I really prayed about how I should handle this. Dana's hands spread over the paper, as if trying to iron out the wrinkles. I'm a tough teacher. I want the kids to respect me, but more than that, I want to prepare them for the real world. It was a shocker going off to college. I went from feeling like I was at the top of my class to worrying if I'd pass. Miss Anthony was great, don't get me wrong, but well, in college you can't talk your way into a better grade by bringing in a couple of jars of Grandma's homemade applesauce. I understand that you need to give him the grade he deserves, though, as Charlotte said the words, she had a sinking feeling. Sam did just lose his mom and move to a new world, but then again, he'd also been spending a lot of time on other things, on everything else around the farm rather than on his studies. And too often, Sam spent more time with Pete than she thought he should. Well, I've come to a compromise, Dana said. Sam will get a second chance, but he has to do twice as much work, and I want it by the end of the month. What first was a 2-page essay will now be a 4-page report on Nebraska. The good things about this state. Wow. Charlotte noticed Dana said this state instead of our state. She had a million questions about why Dana had decided to go to college in Chicago in the first place, what had happened between her and Pete, and what had kept her away for so long. Yet Charlotte had to remind herself this wasn't the good old days. This was a different day. Dana, or Miss Simmons, was now Sam's teacher. She pushed the plate of muffins closer to the younger woman. That sounds like a good compromise to me. He should be grateful to have a second chance. Yes, well, it's the least I could do, considering all that he's been through recently. Charlotte sat contently with Dana, pulling apart her muffin and placing the small pieces into her mouth. They made small talk about the growth of the town, 2 new gas stations in the last 10 years, and the recent blue ribbon winners at the county fair. Charlotte couldn't help but notice the woman's attention turning to the window over Charlotte's shoulder. When the conversation lagged once again, Charlotte decided to get everything out in the open. Pete is out in the field with the kids and Bob. They're gathering up pipe, getting ready for the soybean harvest. It's that time of year, isn't it? I did see Bill at the post office a few weeks ago. He said everyone is about the same as always. Charlotte noted questions in the woman's gaze. Pete's pretty much the same old guy, happiest getting dirty out in the fields. Dana glanced down. Maybe I'll run into him in town one of these days, or maybe I can invite Sam's teacher over for dinner sometime. Actually, I prefer you don't. Dana rose and carried her empty coffee cup to the sink. It'd probably better for Sam if, well, I don't want my past to complicate things. Dana took her car keys from the front jean pocket. Charlotte wanted to insist that it would be nothing more than a home-cooked meal with an old friend, but in the end decided the young woman, Miss Sims, was right. Sam's grades were enough to focus on for the time being. She slipped a piece of paper, Sam's essay, into the back pocket of her jeans. More than enough. Chapter 4. Laughter filled the air, and Charlotte lifted her head, turning her attention away from the garden toward the group hurrying from behind the large red barn when Bob had parked the truck. Everyone seemed to be talking at once. Charlotte couldn't make it out. She figured it out when Bob rounded the corner of the barn, wet from head to toe. His gray-brown hair lay limp on his forehead, yet the slightest grin played on his lips. Charlotte lifted her hands. Hold it, I want to hear this story. Christopher piped up before the others. Grandpa and Sam made a bet. Yes, they raced to see who could stack the most pipe. Emily giggled. And the loser had to wade into Heather Creek and then squat down so that the water was over their head. Squat? Charlotte placed her hands on her hips. She waged her head at her husband. You're not the young buck you used to be. What if you had gotten or catch in your knee while you were down there? I don't think he took the time to worry about that. He was in the water and out again in 10 seconds, Pete added. Mom, you should have seen it. I've never seen Dad move so fast. He was like the road runner on those old cartoons. Christopher laughed and hurried towards the house. I'll draw you a picture of what it looked like. The other kids also hurried inside, and Charlotte was sure their first stop would be the fridge. She glanced at Bob and lifted an eyebrow. With the kids out of sight, he placed both his hands on his lower back and stretched. Well, it worked. You should have seen those kids hustle. Only problem is, I think I chilled myself to the bone. Maybe my bride can give me a back rub tonight? Bob's eyes twinkled in a way they hadn't since Dennis's accident. Rolling his eyes, Pete started back toward the barn. People, please. Yes, well, we'll have to see about that. In the meantime, I think you should know we had a special visitor to Heather Creek Farm today. A Miss Dana Simmons. Charlotte raised her voice, emphasizing the last 3 words. Pete stopped mid-step and turned. His face displayed both curiosity and fear. He hurried toward her, brushing his brown hair from his forehead. And what did you tell her? That I was still here on the farm? His words stopped short. Red tinged his cheeks, and he looked away. Dana, I haven't seen her for ages. Bob placed an arm around Charlotte's shoulders. I hope you invited her back for dinner. No, because I'm afraid she came to talk about Sam. It seems she's his English teacher, and well, there are a few struggles, you know. with so much going on. Thankfully, Bob didn't probe for details. He was too busy studying his son's face. Pete removed his green John Deere cap and scratched the top of his head. Though he didn't say a word, Charlotte spotted what she thought to be a hint of interest and something else too. Embarrassment, maybe? After all, Dana had left Bedford, lived other places, and experienced new things while Pete was still on the farm, just where she had left him. The front door opened, and Sam came outside, his hands tucked deep into his pockets. "Hey, Grandma, is there any more pizza left over from the other day?" "Sam, that was 3 days ago," she called back. "What do you think the answer is?" He turned back to go inside the house, but Pete hurried forward. "Hey, buddy, I have to head into town to pick up some things from the feed store. How about you come with me and we'll stop by Rose's Pizza on the way home?" A smile spread across Sam's face, and Charlotte knew pizza was only part of it. She saw the way Sam often watched Pete with interest and awe. Perhaps it was due to the fact that Sam hadn't been reared with a male role model, or maybe because they were similar in more ways than one. "Whatever it takes to motivate a guy or two," Bob chuckled. He turned to the garden, taking it in. So his words were interrupted as the girls darted through the back door, down the steps, and hurried toward Charlotte. "Grandma, we have a great idea." Emily had a smudge of dirt on her nose, and Charlotte resisted the urge to wipe it away. "Since Ashley was so much help today, I was thinking she should stay the night again. She said she'd helped with a soybean harvest before on her grandpa's farm. My grandpa was teaching me to drive the grain truck. Well, this grandpa most likely won't let that happen," Bob scoffed. "But I think it's a great idea." Bob's eyebrows shot up, and Charlotte patted his arm. "The spending the night, not the driving." She tucked a strand of Emily's light hair behind her ear. She tried to do the same with Ashley's hair, but the red curls just bounced back in place. "If it's okay with Ashley's mom, that is." She saw Christopher scurry across the yard toward the barn. In the meantime, Charlotte said, "I need to check on your brother. He's up to something. He's had a mischievous air about him lately." Alright, we're going to stop there. I didn't realize I read 3 chapters. So, next Saturday, we will be on chapter 6. I hope you all enjoyed Sweet September. We got 7 in the house, or at least that's what it's saying to me here. Here come the dirty parts. So, I want to thank you all so much for coming out to hear the reading. Remember, you're not alone. You are loved. Stay happy, healthy, and safe. I'm going to get back outside. I got animals to do, and yeah, got to tidy up before the evening comes, so time to party now. Nope, I got to get back outside, so maybe next time, Firefly. Thank you all so much for coming out on this Saturday. Thank you, Vermont. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.